Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day, for the space that you provided for us to come to worship in your name. We pray that your presence would richly dwell with us in our time together. I pray that the meditations of my heart and the words of my mouth would be honoring in your sight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I want to invite you to think back a little over a year ago with me to August of 2014. By that point, Beth had been experiencing about 5 months of a flare-up of her Crohn's disease and had been mostly on a liquid diet. Soccer was starting up. I was getting ready to teach a class in the fall, and Beth was scheduled for a bowel resection surgery on August 11th. And as that day approached, and also that weekend before that day, there was a conference gathering of the Ohio Conference delegates because we hadn't been able to finish our business back in March, and so we had this special session in August in which we were getting together to talk about those things. And in the midst of all that was going on and preparing for the surgery, we reached a crisis point in our relationship with each other. Beth hadn't been able to do the things she wanted to do over the summer because of her illness and not having much energy. She hadn't been able to do her freezer corn, for one thing. And she decided that she wasn't going to be able to do it after her surgery. She hadn't been able to do it yet. It needed to happen, and she was going to do her freezer corn. And in fact, instead of just doing the 24 to 25 dozen that she typically does, she decided she was going to do 35 dozen. Like 2 days before the surgery. Well, this was a little bit frustrating to me. First of all, because I was concerned about her health. She looked at it as, well, I'm going to have all these days to rest after my surgery. And I was thinking it's probably good to have a little bit of strength and energy going into your surgery for your recovery. And so I tried to gently encourage her to not do all this corn. I suggested that, well, freezer corn is much better. Canned corn is okay, and we could do that this year. But she had her mindset, and she had decided she was going to do it, and she was launching into it. And it got to a point in which our discussion got much more heated with all of the stress and the concern and not feeling heard. I actually reached the point in which I felt like I needed to get out of the house and take a walk. But I was also fearful of what that might mean for our relationship if I just left. And so in the midst of all these emotions, I had to decide whether I was going to leave or if there was some type of creative alternative that I could come up with for how I could talk with her about this. And yet, when our emotions are high and when we're angry, those are some of the times when we're the least creative in our thinking. Well, that brings me to our passage for this morning. We've been reading through chronologically in the Bible. Now we come to the New Testament. The Gospel of Matthew begins with the birth of Jesus, the coming of the Magi, and the escape to Egypt. You soon read of the baptism of Jesus, the introduction of John the Baptist and Jesus' baptism. We read of him going out into the wilderness for those 40 days and being tempted. And then when he comes back, beginning his ministry and calling the first of his disciples. And then we come to Matthew 5. A portion of the text that we often refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus begins by giving these Beatitudes, and then he starts this section in which he talks about Old Testament passages. People seem to be a little bit concerned of what he was really talking about here. Was he coming to destroy and throw away all that they had known in their faith, all that they had learned through the years, all of what the Old Testament had to say? No. He had not come to abolish the law and the prophets. He had come to fulfill them. Through reading of this Old Testament that we've been spending the last 10 months on, we've come in contact with this reality that Jesus was not abolishing but fulfilling. It's through understanding and dwelling in and seeking to become more familiar with these ideas that we have a foretaste of the kingdom that has to come, that we have these signs and emblems that identify the Messiah to come. But Jesus also was aware that people weren't fully grasping all of what God intended in what he was saying. He began to talk about these passages saying, "You have heard it said, but I say unto you." And the first one he began with was anger. "You have heard it said to people long ago, do not murder." He starts out by going right back to Exodus 20:13, to the 10 Commandments. You shall not murder. But then he takes it further. He moves beyond that. He says, in fact, if you are angry with your brother or sister, you are subject to judgment. If you say to your brother or sister, Raca, you may be brought before the council. And if you call them, you fool, you're in danger of the fires of hell. That's some pretty weighty stuff. That really shifts things around from just this act of murder in a literal way to a much more figurative understanding of the significance of this anger. But what does this really mean for us? What is this term Raca? It's original to the Greek text, though it's not original to the Greek language. There's a little bit of debate on what it means, but it probably means something like foolishness, unworthy, perhaps blockhead or idiot, some would say, but with even more of a harsh tone than what we would sometimes think of today. We're used to a society in which we banter back and forth calling names. Our presidential candidates even call each other names. It's commonplace for us. But at the time, it would have been very offensive, very hurtful. And Jesus is telling us not to even call one another Raca or fool. We are not to even go to the point of calling each other names. Now that might seem a little bit silly to us because we're all adults here and we don't call each other names, right? Certainly our kids still do, believe me, they still do that. We have to work at that, but we're beyond that. And yet I wonder if you, like I, sometimes fall into the trap, not of actually calling someone a name, but of thinking something in your mind. Of coming to a place of trying to write someone off as just crazy or neurotic or some type of, stupid as Mary said, some type of terminology in which what we're doing actually is belittling the person. In which as we think of them, we are raising ourselves up by lowering them down. In which we are calling into question that divine spark of the God, creator of the universe, that each of us are created in God's image. That in some small way we are working at killing just a little bit of their self-worth, of their identity. But Jesus is calling us not only to not physically murder someone, which I trust that none of us here would do, but to also, within our hearts, be consistent about our concern and our caring for one another, even those that we are angry with, that we not call names or belittle them. But then he even takes it another step beyond that, because next he says that if you are standing at the altar, ready to give your offering, and you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering at the altar, go and reconcile, and then come back to present your offering. It's that important that we would set aside our offering and what we're there to do before God to go and to reconcile with our brother or our sister. Now, we don't typically bring an offering up, certainly not in the way that they did in the Old Testament. But I wonder if this would be representative of any one of our ways of encountering God. Before you come to worship, reconcile with your brother. Before you pray together, reconcile with your sister. Before you study the scriptures together, reconcile. Before you share in communion, reconcile. We are to set aside whatever it is that we are coming to God with to work at reconciling with our brother and sister. But isn't it also interesting that Jesus doesn't say, if you are angry at your brother or sister, go and reconcile. He flips it around. If you remember that your brother has something against you, go and reconcile. Now, obviously, there has to be a certain level of awareness that your brother or sister might have something against you. But if you are even aware of that, it is each of our responsibilities then to go and to work at right relationships with our brothers and our sisters. We're told that we should not commit sin in our anger, that we should not let the sun go down on our anger or to give the devil a foothold. It's that serious that we would go and do it at that time rather than following through first with that religious duty that we're involved with. And we're told in Romans 12:18 that we should not allow that to get in the way of things. We should always, as much as it depends on each of us, be at peace with our brothers and sisters. There's a certain amount that we can't control, obviously. But as much as it depends on us, we should be right at peace with our brothers and our sisters. We should not be calling names. We should be setting aside our religious duties to take care of our relationships with one another. And then he goes on to say that if you are on the way to court with your accuser, reconcile on the way. Don't even let it get to the point of where you go to the court where the judge may turn you over to the officer and the officer puts you into prison. Instead, you should reconcile on the way. That seems pretty significant to me within our culture in which there's so much suing and legal action that's taken. We jump so quickly from this offense that may be rather minor, actually, to this major legal battle to take care of it and to give them what for. How significant is it for us, especially within the church, to be able to model a different way of reconciling with one another? And especially to be able to show that to those who aren't familiar with that way of doing things. To offer Christ's peace, to offer reconciliation. Isn't that a central part of what the gospel is? That God desired to reconcile with us, so he sent his Son? And that we, in turn, should reconcile with each other? And that in doing so, we become representatives of reconciliation with all those that we encounter. That it would move beyond. And in a society in which so many marriages end in unreconcilable differences, that seems pretty significant. Which brings me back to that night with Beth and the 35 dozen ears of corn. She was set, she was working on it, getting the corn off the cobs. I was becoming more and more frustrated and agitated, and I had to decide what I was going to do. Thankfully, by the grace of God, I did not walk out the door. Instead, I was able to step back and to be able to re-engage and to understand what her motivation was for doing this. It wasn't that she was crazy. She hadn't been able, for the last several months, to care for and provide for her family in the way that she felt like she should, because she had no energy. And as crazy as it was, not that she was crazy, but as crazy as it was to process 35 dozen ears of corn right before she's going to surgery, for her it was a way of working through that guilt and a physical sign of how much she loves us. Because she was providing for us and making something nice that we can enjoy for the whole year, and actually still beyond. There's still some in the freezer. But in order for me to come to that point of reconciliation, I needed to be able to set aside the temptation to label or to categorize or to put down, I had to be able to come to a point of listening and talking with her. And I had to make that a priority, not to let the sun set on her. I've sometimes been challenged, perhaps even a little annoyed at times, that God has done that in ways in which, in preparation for a sermon, I know I'm going to be talking about a particular issue. And when you know it, that Thursday or Friday, Beth and I get into an argument, or we have a discussion about something. And by gum, I have to get this reconciled with you before Sunday, because I have to get up in the pulpit and talk about this. And we need to take care of this. But isn't that the way it is, that God works through our lives, teaching and instructing us and calling us to faithfulness, to reconciliation with our brothers and sisters? It seems fitting to me that today we would talk about this, that we come to this point in our reading on the day that we're celebrating World Communion, a time in which we share with our brothers and sisters around the world. Because in 1 Corinthians 11, Paul talks about how they were struggling in that church. There was division. There was discord. And he talked about the importance of coming together at the table in a worthy manner after having done some self-examination. And so to wrap up the sermon for today, we are going to take some time to do some examination. Bill's going to come forward and play some music. And I would invite you during that time to open yourself up to the Holy Spirit, inviting the Holy Spirit to remind you of anything that may need to be dealt with, whether that's between you and God, whether that's between you and a brother or sister who's present here today, whether that's praying for someone else who might even not realize that they need reconciliation. That as we come to the point of service where we're gathering around these tables together in fellowship, that we can be reconciled to one another and to our God.
WBTL, we believe in